Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, I want to ask you, where are you watching us from? Are you tuning in from New York, or maybe out west in California? Drop your city in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is joining from. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. Your support helps us keep sharing these real, heartfelt stories with all of you. Now, grab a cup of tea or settle into your favorite chair, because today's story is one I'll never forget, and I promise it might just touch your heart in ways you didn't expect. It's about a phone call, a moment of raw emotion, and a connection I never saw coming. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. I had just finished putting the kettle on and was tidying the living room, moving a stray throw pillow back onto the couch where it belonged. The sunlight filtered through the half-open blinds, casting stripes of gold and shadow across the floorboards. I remember thinking how ordinary everything felt that day, completely unaware that it was about to change with a single call. The name on the caller ID was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. There was a brief hesitation before I spoke, a polite hello, that I probably said a little too softly. The voice on the other end was hesitant, strained, yet unmistakably sincere. "Hi, this is Paul Harris. I'm Stephen's father. I don't even know if you remember me, but I got your number from my son." Stephen was my grandson's friend, the boy who spent endless summer afternoons at our house building model airplanes or sneaking too many cookies from the kitchen. I remembered Paul vaguely from the few times I'd met him at school events, always courteous but quiet, hovering on the edge of conversations. Hearing his voice now, though, there was something heavy in it, something I couldn't quite place. I motioned for him to sit, though of course he couldn't see me. "I remember you, Paul," I said. "How are you doing?" There was a pause, then a sharp inhale, the kind that carries more than just breath. "Not great," he admitted. I wasn't sure who else to call. I guess I just needed someone to listen." I felt a little jolt in my chest. It was strange, the way life sometimes threads you into moments you never anticipate. I had always thought of myself as a listener, someone people confided in when the world felt too heavy. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered pain, and I could hear it all in his quiet, trembling tone. "Tell me what's going on," I said softly. "I'm here." He laughed nervously, a small sound that didn't quite reach his words. "It's ridiculous, really. I thought I could manage everything on my own, but it's just too much sometimes. Losing my job, the house, all of it. I feel like I'm failing my family." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The sun had shifted slightly in the window, and I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, birds chirping lazily in the distance. It felt like the world had slowed, just for this conversation. "You're not failing, Paul. You're facing a storm, and anyone would struggle under that weight. Just being able to say it out loud takes courage." He hesitated, and then a long sigh came through the phone. "I don't know why I called you," he admitted. "I don't even know if you have the right to care about this." "I care," I said, a little firmer this time. "I care because you're human, because you're hurting, and because sometimes all it takes is someone else to hear you. That alone can make a difference." For a few minutes, we just spoke. He told me about his life over the past months, the promotions he missed out on, the unexpected medical bills, the quiet moments of loneliness. I shared little snippets of my own experiences, things I'd learned the hard way about grief, disappointment, and the quiet victories that often go unnoticed. There was a moment, about 20 minutes in, where he laughed quietly at one of my stories, a real laugh this time, not forced or polite. And in that laugh, I felt a shift. Not a solution, not an ending, but a small bridge forming between two strangers who had never expected to meet like this. It was profound in a way I can't fully explain. I noticed the late afternoon light deepening into warm amber, spilling across the kitchen counters. There was something grounding about the ordinary scenery, about the kettle, the couch, the fading sunlight, that made the conversation feel intimate and honest. Paul spoke then of his regrets, and for the first time, I didn't feel the distance between our ages or our lives. I felt a shared humanity, a mutual understanding that sometimes words themselves carry more power than action ever could. When he finally said, "Thank you for listening," I realized how much he needed to hear that, even more than I needed to be the listener. There was a raw vulnerability there that was both humbling and moving. I assured him, as best as I could, that he wasn't alone, that seeking support wasn't weakness, and that even in the darkest moments, a conversation could bring a spark of hope. By the time we hung up, the sun had dipped low, streaking the living room with deep reds and golds. I felt lighter, in an odd, reflective way. It wasn't that Paul's problems had vanished. Far from it, but sharing them had created a thread of connection, a reminder that human experiences are often intertwined in unexpected ways. That night, I sat by the window, watching the neighborhood quiet down. I thought about Paul, about Stephen, and about the delicate, invisible ties that connect us all. It was a reminder that life's most profound lessons often come from moments we don't see coming, and from people we didn't expect to touch our lives. And in that quiet, I found myself wondering how many of us go through life believing our burdens are ours alone, when in reality, there's always someone willing to listen, if only we reach out. That phone call had changed my perspective, not just on Paul, but on the way we navigate pain, compassion, and human connection. After that first phone call, I couldn't shake the conversation from my mind. It lingered in the quiet moments of my day, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the soft clink of my teacup against the saucer. Paul's words had a weight to them, a raw honesty that left a quiet ache in my chest. I found myself thinking about him often, wondering how a man I barely knew could carry such a heavy burden with so little outward complaint. It was a reminder that everyone, no matter how composed they appear, has struggles hidden beneath the surface. A week later, there was another call. I hesitated before picking up, my fingers tracing the edge of the phone as if expecting it to bite. But when I heard his voice, softer now, less strained, I felt a small sense of relief. "Hi," he said. "It's me again." "Hi, Paul," I replied, smiling to myself. "I'm glad you called." There was a pause, and then a quiet laugh, almost embarrassed. I wasn't sure I should, but I think I needed someone to check in with me. "Sometimes checking in with yourself isn't enough," I said gently. "And sometimes we need a reminder that we're not alone." We talked for what felt like hours. This time, the conversation wasn't only about the weight of life's hardships. It was lighter in some ways, tinged with small humor, little glimpses of hope. He told me about his garden, how he had started planting tomatoes and cucumbers on his tiny balcony, and I could hear his pride, subtle but real, in the careful way he described each plant. I shared my own gardening mishaps, the time I thought I could grow tulips but ended up with more weeds than flowers. He laughed, genuinely this time, and I felt that bridge we'd started forming grow stronger, a quiet connection built from empathy and mutual respect. As the weeks went on, our calls became more regular. Each conversation seemed to pull him a little closer to a sense of clarity, and me, too, closer to a renewed appreciation of life's fragile but beautiful rhythms. One afternoon, he called with a different tone in his voice, more hesitant, almost vulnerable in a way that made my heart tighten. I don't know how to say this," he began, "but I was wondering, would it be possible to meet in person, just to talk?" I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Meeting someone from a phone call was a leap, but there was something in his voice that made me trust him instinctively. "I think that could be nice," I said carefully. "Would you like to come by my house, or shall I meet you somewhere?" "Would you mind if I came to your house?" he asked. "I feel safer there." I agreed. We decided on a Saturday morning, promising to keep it simple: coffee, conversation, no pressure. When he arrived, I opened the door to a man slightly taller than I expected, with kind eyes that carried the faint traces of sleepless nights. He smiled nervously, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he carried himself. We stepped into the kitchen together, the sunlight spilling through the windows, warming the room. There was something comforting about the familiar hum of the kettle and the scent of fresh coffee. We sat at the small kitchen table, the steam curling from our mugs, and just looked at each other for a moment. There was an unspoken acknowledgement of the path that had led us here, a path lined with vulnerability, trust, and quiet bravery. "I wasn't sure I'd be able to do this," he admitted finally. I thought, maybe it's easier to just keep it all bottled up. "It's not easy," I said, reaching out a little to brush my hand across the table, as if the gesture could carry some reassurance. "But sometimes it's the act of sharing that makes the weight lighter, even if only a little." We spoke about his struggles, of course, his fears, his failures, and the lingering sense of inadequacy that had haunted him for months. But we also spoke about smaller victories, the quiet joys that often get overlooked in the shadow of stress. A well-watered plant, a laugh shared with a friend, a sunset that catches you off guard with its beauty. At one point he paused, looking out the window at the garden beyond, where a few early blooms had started to appear. "I never realized," he said quietly, "how much just talking to someone could change how I see things. It's strange, but it feels like a weight has lifted." I nodded, feeling a swell of warmth. "It's not just you," I said. "It's for both of us. Connection has a way of reminding us that life isn't meant to be carried alone." As the morning stretched into early afternoon, we lingered over the coffee, talking about memories from our childhoods, the people who shaped us, the little mistakes that taught the biggest lessons. There was a rhythm to our conversation, a natural flow that made the hours slip by unnoticed. When he finally stood to leave, he turned to me, and I could see a new kind of steadiness in his posture, a quiet resilience that hadn't been there before. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me be human in front of you." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "Thank you for trusting me," I replied. "That's what makes this meaningful." As I closed the door behind him, I felt an unexpected calm. The house seemed quieter than before, but not empty. There was a lingering warmth, a sense that life could surprise you with connections in the most unlikely ways. And for the first time in a long while, I felt grateful, not for a solution, not for an answer, but for the simple, profound act of being seen, truly and without pretense. That day stayed with me, etched into the rhythm of my daily life like a favorite song. And I knew, without knowing exactly how, that the story between us was just beginning. One phone call, one meeting, and one shared moment at a time. After that morning with Paul, I found myself thinking about him often, not in an obsessive way, but in the kind of quiet reflection that lingers long after someone leaves your home. There was something about his presence, the careful way he carried himself, that left a subtle mark on me. I realized that our conversations were no longer just about sharing burdens. They were teaching me about patience, understanding, and the small, overlooked joys that keep life afloat. It was a Monday afternoon when I received his next call. I was sitting by the window, the light soft and diffused by the clouds rolling in over the neighborhood. A gentle breeze stirred the curtains, and I could hear the faint chatter of children playing a few houses down. I answered the phone with a casual hello, but immediately noticed a change in his tone. "Hi," he said, quieter than usual. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I thought maybe talking could help. I felt a pang of concern. "Of course, Paul. You can always call. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, and then the words spilled out in a rush. He talked about the ongoing stress at work, the constant worry about bills and responsibilities, and the fear that he wasn't doing enough for his family. But there was something more this time, a hint of shame, a layer of doubt that seemed heavier than before. "I don't know why I feel like this," he said. "I've got people around me. I've got a family who loves me, and yet it doesn't feel like it's enough." I listened, letting the silence stretch for a moment before replying. "Paul, it's normal to feel that way. Life has a way of piling on expectations, some of them real, some imagined. The important thing is that you recognize it and let yourself share it instead of carrying it all alone." He sighed, a long, weary sound that made my heart ache. "Sometimes I think I'm the only one who struggles like this. Everyone else seems fine." I could feel the familiar weight of empathy pressing down, but instead of offering platitudes, I spoke gently, deliberately. "That's rarely true. Everyone has challenges they hide, fears they keep tucked away. You're not alone in feeling overwhelmed, and the fact that you're reaching out, that shows a strength you might not even see in yourself." We talked for nearly an hour that afternoon, not about solutions, but about noticing the little things: the way sunlight fell on the porch swing, the smell of rain in the air, the comfort of a well-worn sweater. I shared stories from my own life, times when I felt lost and unsure, and he responded with nods and murmurs, as if confirming that he, too, understood the value of these seemingly small details. Eventually, he paused and said something that stopped me mid-thought. "You know, I never expected to find this kind of connection. I mean, I didn't think someone like me, someone struggling and failing in so many ways, could be understood by someone else. And yet, here you are." I smiled softly, feeling the truth of his words resonate. "Paul, we all need someone who sees us as we are, not as we think we should be. Sometimes it comes from family, sometimes from friends, and sometimes from strangers who become something more. It's the recognition itself that matters." A few days later, we decided to meet again, this time for a walk around the local park. The air was crisp, tinged with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. The trees, their branches heavy with gold and crimson, seemed to bend slightly toward the path, as if leaning in to listen. There was a subtle chill in the air, but it was the kind of briskness that invigorates, that makes every step feel purposeful. We walked slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Favorite books, childhood memories, the absurdities of local politics, and the little victories that often go unnoticed. I noticed the tension in Paul's shoulders gradually ease, his stride becoming more confident with each step. There was a rhythm to our movement, a flow that seemed to mirror the unspoken understanding growing between us. At one point, we stopped near a small pond, where ducks drifted lazily across the water. Paul leaned on the railing, gazing at their reflections. "It's strange," he said quietly. "Even with all the chaos, all the problems, moments like this make it feel like things might be okay." I nodded, looking out over the pond. They do. Life is rarely about fixing everything at once. Sometimes it's about noticing the moments, appreciating them, and letting them remind you that hope isn't gone. It's just waiting to be seen. For the first time, I felt that our connection had shifted. It wasn't just about support or listening anymore. It was about mutual recognition, a quiet respect for each other's humanity. He wasn't the man burdened by shame and fear, and I wasn't the woman simply offering guidance. We were two people, sharing the path of life together, acknowledging the weight and beauty of it in equal measure. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm amber glow across the park, Paul turned to me with a small, genuine smile. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me feel seen, without judgment." And in that moment, I realized that this journey, this unexpected friendship, was teaching me something just as valuable as it was teaching him. That even in later stages of life, connections can surprise you, moments can heal, and human understanding can arrive when you least expect it. We walked back to our cars in companionable silence, each step lighter than before. I felt a calm, a quiet sense of growth, and an anticipation for the next chapter of our story. Life had a way of guiding you toward people who mattered, sometimes through a simple phone call, sometimes through shared walks in the park. And I knew that for both of us, these moments were only the beginning. It was late autumn when I received Paul's next call. The days were shorter now, the sunlight softer and more golden, filtering through the bare branches that lined the streets. I answered the phone with a familiar warmth, feeling a quiet anticipation I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "Hi," he said, his voice steadier than before, calmer. "Hi, I just wanted to thank you. I mean really thank you for everything." I felt a smile tug at my lips. "You don't need to thank me, Paul. You've been doing all the hard work yourself. I've just been listening." "No," he insisted, a hint of amusement in his tone. "It's more than that. You've helped me see things differently, appreciate the small victories, and remember that it's okay to lean on someone. You've changed how I think about myself." His words struck me in a way I hadn't expected. There's a peculiar, quiet joy in realizing that a connection you've nurtured has rippled beyond the moments you shared, that you've been part of someone's transformation. We arranged to meet again, this time at a small local cafe. The air was crisp and fragrant with the scent of roasted coffee beans, and the warm glow of the cafe lights spilled onto the sidewalk. There was a comforting hum of conversation around us, the ordinary rhythm of people going about their day. And yet, there was a distinct feeling of intimacy, a quiet bubble that existed just for the two of us. Paul arrived first, and I waved as he entered, his presence calm, his smile relaxed. He sat down across from me, and for a moment we just observed each other in comfortable silence. There was no tension, no lingering unease, only the gentle recognition of the journey we had shared. We ordered coffee and sat with our mugs steaming between us, letting the warmth seep into our hands. Conversation came naturally, flowing from one topic to the next. Our favorite books, memories from our families, the small lessons life has taught us over the years. I noticed that he spoke with a confidence and ease I hadn't heard in our earliest conversations, a lightness in his tone that suggested a new chapter in his life had quietly begun. At one point, Paul leaned back in his chair and looked out the window, watching the leaves drift lazily along the sidewalk. "You know," he said softly, "I never imagined I'd find someone I could really talk to about everything. Someone who would listen without judgment, who would just understand. I thought those kinds of connections were rare, maybe impossible." "They are rare," I replied, my voice gentle. "But sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes the people you least expect bring the most meaning to your days." He nodded, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and a quiet contemplation. "It's not just about the conversations either. It's the reminder that I'm not alone, that someone else sees the struggles, the small victories, the human behind it all. That matters more than I realized." We sat in that cafe for hours, not out of necessity, but because neither of us wanted the moment to end. There was a profound sense of understanding that didn't need words, a silent acknowledgement that we had crossed a threshold together, from loneliness and uncertainty to clarity and connection. By the time we left, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold. The streets glowed softly under the streetlights, and the evening air was crisp but comforting. We walked together for a few blocks, neither of us in a hurry, savoring the quiet companionship that had grown between us. As we reached the corner where our paths diverged, Paul turned to me with a smile that was steady, genuine, and warm. "Thank you," he said again, this time with a sense of finality, but not an ending, more like a promise that the connection we'd nurtured would endure. For listening, for understanding, for showing me that life can feel lighter, even in the hardest times. I placed my hand lightly on his arm in a gesture of reassurance, of mutual respect. "And thank you for trusting me. That trust is what made all of this possible." We parted with a quiet nod, the kind that carries both affection and respect, and I watched him walk down the street, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. Life hadn't changed in grand gestures. There were still challenges, still responsibilities, still moments of doubt, but something fundamental had shifted. The weight of isolation had lessened, replaced by a quiet affirmation of connection, empathy, and understanding. That night, as I sat by the window reflecting on the past weeks, I realized that the most unexpected encounters often leave the deepest impressions. A simple phone call, a shared walk, a quiet conversation over coffee. These moments, fleeting and ordinary, can create ripples of change that linger far longer than we anticipate. And in that reflection, I found gratitude for the unexpected connection, for the courage to be vulnerable, and for the reminder that human hearts, no matter their age or circumstance, are capable of profound understanding and compassion. Paul had come into my life at a time when both of us needed it, and together we had discovered that even in the most ordinary days, extraordinary moments of empathy and connection are possible. I closed my eyes, feeling a quiet warmth spread through me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt fully at peace with the unexpected beauty of human connection.